So recently I saw this video, and then I saw this one. Oh, and then I saw this video, and this one, and this one. The Stanley Cup, what is going on, and how can we use the language of breath to make sense of it and maybe get through this crazy time? So my name is Coomer. Welcome to the channel if you're new here. On this channel, we talk about breathwork, cold exposure, using the language of breath, philosophy of breathwork, and self-awareness. You can take a look at the links below to find my books. And we're looking at how psychology and our physiology interface using breath. But today, the world's on fire. What is going on? So I'm coming out to my favorite spot out here in nature. Got a lot of climbing around to do. Maybe we're going to talk about it, maybe make a little bit more sense of it. So I might be a little late to the party when it comes to the Stanley Cup business. To be honest, I am a little lost as far as all of this. I got to say, I've seen a few people have them, mostly women at the store or just kind of a random thing. I really didn't think it was a big deal. Then I see all of this stuff about people getting bullied because they didn't have the right brand, or people stealing them, like blatantly fighting about them. We've got this thing that is this treasure that seems to be dominating the thoughts of an enormous amount of our population. And this isn't the first time. You know, we've seen this sort of stuff with iPhones. We've seen it, strangely enough, if you're old enough, you might remember Beanie Babies. I'll never forget, that was just a weird craze. Like, and honestly, one of the saddest videos I've ever seen in my life was, there was this couple that got together over their love for Beanie Babies, and then they got a divorce, and then they filmed them having to divvy up their Beanie Babies as they were getting divorced. One of the saddest videos, strangest and saddest videos I've ever seen in my life. And so what are we facing here? And ultimately, there are unconscious processes at play. You know, this is not a bunch of people making rational choices saying, you know, I've decided that the best thing for me in my life is to buy this cup because this cup is so good at keeping my drink cold. It's so good at, I guess that's what it does, right? I mean, I don't know what else the cup does. It keeps your drink cold or hot. So that, I mean, there is a function there, and I'm not gonna say that there's no place for that. I have mugs, you know, I have thermals. They're nice. But somehow we've got this one kind that is now this icon. It's a status symbol. And we can trace this back to our unconscious desire to put us into a better position when it comes to this thing called core affect. So we have 5 basic core affects, and these are our basic desires, these basic instincts, these essential needs that we have as human beings. One is nutrition. Of course, we know that we have to eat, and so we're going to do certain things in our lives to ensure that we have food, that's going to take a dominant place in the hierarchy of needs whenever we feel like it's being threatened. Another is sex. You know, we want to make sure we're able to reproduce. We want to be able to have a partner, a relationship of that kind. The next, we want a position in our social hierarchy. And that's one of the things we're seeing this here. Another is exploration. We'll talk about that on a different day. But we do have this urge and this desire for exploration. And lastly, we have the urge for physical safety. So just the desire to have physical safety, whether that is in the form of shelter or simply being safe from predators or other people, whether this is a physical threat or it's just a comfort issue. Anyway, we have these issues. Sometimes we call it physical integrity, but we have these base desires, and they're called our core affect. All of us have a little bit different value systems for how these things play in our life, but we have unconscious processes. So the vast majority of our thinking is not apparent to us. It is unconscious. It is below the level of conscious thinking. We don't actually have access to a lot of these thoughts that are dominating our lives. And so what we're seeing here, like so many things in history, and I am sure it goes back to, Grug, when everyone was getting the new spear. He felt like he needed to get the new spear too, and so that way he fit into his society. You have to understand our social need, our desire to fit into a social hierarchy is very high in the list of needs. And because for human beings, it pretty much directly relates to all the other core affects. So, and more so even now today, because we're living in a globalized world, we understand that if not for our place in the social structure, we would have no food. Like, unless you grow all of your own food, then in that case, you don't need a social structure to provide that for you. But most of our needs are based on our position within our society. For one reason or another, we will see certain things as signifiers of better places in this social hierarchy. In this case, it is the Stanley Cup. And this leads us to believing that if we have these things, then we're going to be happy, then we're going to feel all of this. We call this the hedonic treadmill. And the hedonic treadmill, it basically states that there's this place, or there's this thing, or this job, or this relationship. There is this thing in the future outside of me that once I achieve that, once I obtain that, then I will be happy. If only I had a vehicle. If only I had a nice vehicle. If only I had a new nice vehicle. If only I had a new nice vehicle that could go faster than my friend's vehicle, then I would be happy. We have this thing called the hedonic treadmill that often governs our lives without us even knowing about it. So how can breathwork help us? How can breathwork bring a little bit more sanity into this crazy world? If you're being governed by unconscious forces, right? It's difficult to know that, first of all. We have so many biases. One is our confirmation bias. We also have a self-preservation bias. And we have so many biases that prevent us from seeing our actions in a rational way. So what we have to do is we have to say, okay, I'm going to put into practice this thing that I do regularly that helps me to break through a lot of that, so that I can look at my actions in a rational way, so that I can look at my desires in a rational way. Rationality is key here because, again, we're talking about a cup. They're really, in this case, but I mean, it could be anything, right? We've been through a lot since in the past few years. There's a lot of crazes, right? The search for safety, right? The search for fitting in, the search for all these things. And it's easy to get swept up because we have an innate desire for social acceptance and for our place in social hierarchy. And it's not a bad thing, it's just a thing that we have to say it is a thing. We're all there. And so what breathwork can do, and especially when we're looking at it through the lens of the language of breath, is we start to, in the language of breath, we focus a lot on internal awareness, right? The sensations, all these emotions, all the things that are coming up from that unconscious self, and how we can start to learn to speak back using our breathing. But I'm sure you've heard this already. I'm sure you already expected me to say this, right? So let's take this to the next level. Every time I do a YouTube video, there's an enormous amount of comments that I get about how I don't need anything. All of these consumers out there are a bunch of morons. Here I am an ascended master. I don't really have those needs. There's your Stanley Cup. There is that thing that you believe puts you in a better place in the social hierarchy. We all have a Stanley Cup. We are constantly governed by these urges and desires. What kind of phone do you have? Is it really because the operating system is superior to the other one? Very few of our impulses, very few of our desires come from a place of rationality. However, because we have a thing called the self-preservation bias. And because the unconscious you is so good at what it does, and that's getting what it needs, right? The unconscious is trying to protect you, is trying to help you. And this is the part of you that thinks first. It thinks most. It's the part of you that can color your rationality. And it can also trick you into rationalizing decisions that aren't actually very rational. So we all have these things that we believe that we want, these things that we strive for, these things that we value, because we unconsciously believe that they will put us in a better place in that social hierarchy, or that they're going to put us in a place that makes us safer, that brings us more nutrition. Maybe it's something that just simply satisfies our need for exploration. But this core affect, these basic needs, are the foundation for why our unconscious does these weird things. And it can manifest itself in strange ways. We see it every year. Now it's the Stanley Cup. So knowing this, yes, definitely use breath work. Use your rational thinking mind. And no, I'm not gonna go out and buy a Stanley Cup. But having this knowledge, knowing that we all are dealing with these things, maybe we can look at these videos, maybe we can look at these crazes, instead of being governed by our implicit bias to judge others. Maybe we can look at people with a little bit more love, a little bit more respect, knowing that those people, that's me too. They've got a Stanley Cup, but guess what? I have my Stanley Cups too. So thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for going through this video with me. We're gonna do some breath work now, so stick around for that. Take a look, there's gonna be a link that shows up here in just a second. Also, I'd like to invite you to check out the Patreon Club. This is an awesome group of people who are into breath work just like you. And the official Language of Breath t-shirt, you can find that link below. If you get that t-shirt, you'll probably find a higher place in social hierarchy, huh? Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching, and let's do some breath work now.